Good evening, Issaquah. Good evening, commissioners, and good evening, staff. Tonight, we're going to call the Planning Policy Commission to order, and it is currently 6:35 p.m., August 8th. Today's meeting is a hybrid meeting. The Planning Policy Commission is in person, but staff or members of the public may be attending virtually or in person. Stephen, do we have a quorum this evening?
Chair Voice, yes, you have a quorum tonight, and all commissioners that are not in attendance are excused.
Excellent. Unfortunately, I have more sad news to share with the commission. Yes, unfortunately, Megan Altamore has resigned. She took a position, I don't think she would mind if I share this, with HopeLink, which everybody knows she's worked with very closely, and it's going to be taking more of her time. We wish Megan the best, and we thank her for her service here. I know I learned a lot from Megan, her perspective, and we wish her the best in her new endeavor and a new role at HopeLink. My biggest concern, that's 2 in as many weeks, which they all say things happen in 3s. So I hope nobody else is going to be leaving us anytime soon. So we will see what happens, but hopefully we can stop the bleeding with losing 2 tremendous commissioners, Amma and Megan, and leave it at that. So our first item of business this evening is to take action to approve the minutes for July 25th. These minutes were included in your agenda packet, and so I'll ask my fellow commissioners this evening if you have any concerns or anything you'd like to share about the minutes provided. Hearing none, those minutes are approved. We'll now move on to public comment, which we'll hold at this time. And Amanda, do we have anyone who would like to speak virtually this evening?
No, Chair, we do not.
Right. We will now move on to our regular business. And we have 2 items this evening. And the first is to review the revised policies based on the commission feedback received from the previous meeting. Stephen Padua, our long-range planning manager, will be presenting tonight. So Stephen, when you are ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Voice. Just give me one moment to get connected. All right. Good evening, Commissioners. Stephen Padua, Long-Range Planning Manager. So tonight, as Chair Voice had said, I'm here to return and continue the conversation on the revised policies that we discussed at the July 25th meeting. The direction needed tonight is focused on some of those revised policies, but at the same time, this is still a review of the full draft comp plan, so if there's other policies you would like to discuss, we're open to discuss that tonight. So the first policy, we're going to jump right in unless there's any questions from the commissioners. First policy was with the Economic Vitality Policy, A1. The general feedback we got from the commissioners was to define and clarify the language a little bit better. And so on the screen is the changes that we made based on the commissioners' feedback. And we can discuss that now if there's any additional changes. If we didn't capture the commissioners' feedback at all, please let us know.
What do you think, Stephen? We only have 3 of the policy questions you guys wanted us to review. You just want to take them one at a time?
Yeah, it's up to you, Chair Voice, if you want to just go through all of them and then discuss, or go through one at a time while we have the language on the screen.
Let's do that. There's only 3 of them.
I think there's 5 with the 2 new policies.
Stand corrected. All right. EV Policy A1. Any comments? I thought it was a good update.
Okay, easy enough.
Yeah.
We will move on to the next
I thought
policy.
the language reflected what we wanted, so. Yeah.
And then similar discussion with Economic Vitality Policy A3. There was a request from the commissioners to emphasize all businesses in the language, and so that is what we did with the revision.
Everyone happy? I agree.
Okay, moving on to the Transportation Policy E2. This was a This was, the feedback we got from the commission was to change the language from increase to support use of electric pedal-assisted bicycles. And so that is the language that we changed for this policy.
Okay. This is a highly contentious topic. So, anyone would like to speak on the e-bike? Commissioner Krass.
So, thanks for changing that. This is Commissioner Krass. I guess my point was less about the e-bike one. We can come back to that, but just being very clear of what the role of the city is. And I think this captures it better when we have words like increase, that means we have a vested interest or investment in doing that. And you'd have a metric on that versus the allowing or support says we give the platform to let people go ahead and do that. So I think this one captures it. And I'm curious if we have other areas where we talked about kind of more broadly looking at making sure that we're clear of what the city does and is responsible, that we use the correct language. And this was a good example where I think you made that adjustment. I wasn't sure if there's other places that we need to do that as well.
There was one other policy that's next on the, that'll be next in the presentation where the commission discussed changing the language. So we better define what the city's role is and what exactly we're trying to achieve.
Commissioner Milligan.
Thank you. This is Commissioner Milligan in person. In real life. IRL. Thank you for the change. I wanted to ask my fellow commissioners if they thought that this would address what I thought might be needed for the use of electric pedal assisted and other electric motor assisted mobility types. I was thinking about the safe infrastructure within our city for these vehicles to have a place to go that isn't in conflict with other mobility. And so, this word might work. It's general enough, but what do you think? Because what I was concerned about was safety of pedestrians and then also safety of those electric assisted mobility. Motor assisted mobility. I see a lot of 12 and 14-year-olds in the Issaquah Highlands hauling around on the streets on motor sort of bikes, and I just wondered if this would speak to that need. You guys think so? I don't have another idea. It's just a question.
Chair Voice, if I could just offer for
Sure.
the transportation element being just more containing the broader policies within the mobility master plan itself, where it identifies a lot of the actions, that does do a good job of identifying the broader infrastructure needs to support some of these different uses in terms of complete streets and multimodal uses throughout the city. And so there are other components of that that dive a little more into what Commissioner Milligan, I think, is asking for.
Commissioner Issaquah. Not contentious at all. Anything else? Okay.
So for transportation policy C4, this is the one that I think was discussed a little bit more with the commission, and so which is why it has probably a little more revisions. The amendment or the revision that's on the screen is what was proposed in the language. We also received some comments from commissioners not in attendance tonight that asked for a revision for the commission to consider. And so that is what I'm presenting on the screen now, is a slight revision from what was in your packet. So Chair Voice, I don't know if you want to discuss the original revision first or start with this one.
I'm sorry, but for the audience, maybe you could just read into the record this new language, since other people are just looking at the packet.
Yes, so for what was originally introduced in the commission's packet was this update, which is in the staff memo. We received email comments from Commissioner Kennedy, who asked for a little more language around what was discussed by the commission, which is research other cities' experiences while looking into the potential for partnerships in small light vehicle transportation options and the rest of what was being proposed in the packet.
Commissioner Krass.
John Krass, John Krass again. So this one addresses the comment I made on the previous slide of what's the role when you had investment, that's very specific, and I'm glad we changed that and took that out. And I think it's potential partnerships. Partnerships doesn't necessarily mean money. It could mean we allow you to do it here, or we give you signage or things like that, versus the role, like when you have the words investments, it makes it sound like we are now in the e-bike business, and I'm glad you made that change.
Does the word investment still concern you? Ah, okay. Reading my screen. Okay. Commissioner Zakharoff.
I'm not sure, Commissioner Zakharov, I'm not sure that we should mention the e-bike specifically for that, because e-bike kind of like focuses on some sort of like specific thing, and maybe such as, maybe go back to micromobility word, or light, again, it has lightweight vehicle transportation options, so maybe do not bring such as e-bike programs, just lightweight vehicle transportation options that expand community options for travel. So don't bring that as example.
Great, thank you.
Chair Voice, if we had, at least from the staff perspective of, we originally tried to take e-bike programs out of the language, but we felt that the small lightweight vehicle transportation options wasn't actually specific enough to say this is more than just Uber and Lyft or any other motorized vehicles, but it expands beyond that to also non-motorized vehicles as well, which is why it was kind of proposed this way. If there's another type of program that the commission would prefer us included, but we felt like leaving that blank or leaving that out or something in its place kind of left it too obscure of what it actually was referring to, or at least the original intent of the policy.
Commissioner Zakharoff, do you want to follow up?
Yes, okay, thank you, Stephen. Maybe then just change e-bike to electric bikes. So, because e-bike is, I think it's a word for a specific program, right? It's a name.
Okay.
Commissioner Milligan?
I want to support what you were first saying, Commissioner Katya. I'm glad for the revised language from Commissioner Kennedy for the reasons that Commissioner Krass said, to remove the word investments and rather partnerships. And then also in the newest language, it says look into the potential for partnerships. So that would be evaluating the worthiness of doing that rather than just saying, let's pursue partnerships. We first need to decide whether we would like to pursue partnerships. So I like the new language in many ways. But I do not necessarily want to say, such as e-bike programs. The reason for an e-bike in Issaquah, what that I've heard from people, is to address our hilly nature, and that is taken up with the previous policy where we say support the use of electric pedal-assisted bicycles. Those sorts of things is already addressed in the previous policy. In this policy, we're looking for a relationship perhaps with a provider of small lightweight vehicle transportation options. And I don't think we need to say such as e-bikes at all, because if we did have to say e-bikes, I'd rather just scratch it and say of non-motorized small lightweight vehicle transportation options. If it were just me, I'd say go non-motorized, get rid of the e-bike.
Commissioner Krass?
I do think you need to have some context, because otherwise, like micro-mobility, I don't know what that means. I think the essence of what you're trying to say is other things besides cars, right? So non-motorized automotive or vehicles or things like that. Just giving some context, however you want to do it, I think as long as you do that, I think that's great. But if you took all of it out, it would be like, okay, what does that mean? It means something different. And I agree with you, Stephen, that you need to have some context.
Yeah, I would agree with Chair Voice. I would agree with Stephen and Commissioner Krass. I think you need the context, because what Stephen explained, obviously you can't put in a paragraph and a half in the actual policy. So again, having such as, I think, is the qualifier. So I'm comfortable with the language. And to Commissioner Milligan's point, Yeah, I also really like the beginning part of it too, while looking into potential. That sounds a lot better.
Are the commissioners comfortable with Commissioner Zakharov's suggestion, just change it to electric bike rather than e-bike?
Commissioner Milligan?
Could we, folks, think about using the language from the previous paragraph that says pedal assisted? Because there is quite a range, and part of it becomes a motorbike. And are we really wanting to look for, is this necessarily bike share? It doesn't say. Partnerships for transportation options. If we're trying to be specific, we could try for pedal assisted instead of electric bike. Worth a try? No?
I wonder if we get into in the weeds, because then you also have, you have scooters, Vespas, things like
Oh, that's
that.
right, that's right.
Commissioner Patterson?
I guess that was kind of my question I was going to ask is like, what are the potential small lightweight vehicles that we would consider? Because we have bikes, scooters. Like, do we want to define it to draw a line, or do we want to keep it broad to, I guess, keep our options open?
I take it back, I forgot about scooters.
I like Commissioner Patterson's idea of keeping it broad. I like Commissioner Patterson's idea, keep it broad. Staff can always come back, this can always be amended. So is everyone comfortable with what we see? Did we come up with what we wanted to see, e-bike, or we're just gonna move to electric bike? Electric bike? All right.
Great, thank you. And then for the first new housing policy, it was a slight change, changing from meet to prioritize, just to specifically call out the importance of 0 to 30%. Just quick reminder, this new policy was introduced as a request from the Affordable Housing Committee from King County, who asked for compliance with King County planning policies, which specifically call out 0 to 30% AMI households.
Any comment? Okay, thank you.
And I believe this is our last one. Yes. So this is the other new housing policy. Originally, this was proposed to go into the transportation element, but the discussion with the commission at the last meeting on July 25th was that this should be, because really the focus is around housing coordination with light rail planning or with high capacity transit, belongs in the housing element. So that is what's being proposed.
Commissioner Milligan?
Commissioner Milligan here. I only wanted to explore a little bit more the word adopting supportive land use policies for the reason that I brought this up at the last meeting, and that was that we have supportive land use policies for mass transit in the central Issaquah plan and in the urban growth center. And so by saying adopting supportive land use policies, it's saying we don't have them yet. And I wondered about using word, I would have said, leveraging existing supportive land use policies to collaborate with Sound Transit for light rail service. But I'm open to other ideas. I just didn't like the assumption in that phrase that we didn't have supportive land use policies already.
Great point.
Commissioner, Chair Voice, if I could offer just some supplementary information on the light rail planning guide that was adopted by Council earlier this year. So one of the actions that was called out was actually in the exploration of where we want a new light rail station to go. The advice we've received from multiple other cities and from Sound Transit is just be a little more open for adopting or finding new land use policies, because based on wherever the location could be, your existing policies may not actually support it. And so that's why it was more formed towards adopting supportive land use policies rather than just trying to keep to what you have.
I'd like to change my suggestion.
Please.
What if we change the word adopting to exploring? that too soft? This is assuming that we have to change and do new policies, but all that Stephen is saying is that there might be alternatives, and we want to be open to them.
So by continue to explore supportive land use policy?
By exploring, collaborate with Sound Transit to bring light rail to Issaquah by exploring supportive land use policies, blah, blah, blah.
Commissioner Krass?
Okay, I never get into the wordsmithing, but I'm now changing that. How about just evolving? Because the whole point is, we already have some. They may have to change. And I think the point, Stephen, you're trying to make is, we're going to have to probably evolve as this thing comes down the pike in 20 years from now. Some things will be different, but we'll have to evolve with it. And I think the word evolving is kind of going in between something too soft and then something too specific that we're going to, of course, do that. So that'd be my recommendation, and my one wordsmith recommendation of the night.
Any follow-up to Commissioner Krass's suggestion? Commissioner Zakharoff?
Okay, if we're all suggesting something, maybe adjusting existing supportive. So, because if we want to kind of show that we already have supportive land use policies, it's adjusting existing policies. And we are open to adjust it to whatever the plan would be with a Sound Transit, but we have it, and we're open to adjust it if needed. That would be my suggestion.
I like
Thank
that
you.
better than evolving, no offense. Commissioner Krass, too nebulous. Any comment on Commissioner Zakharoff's?
May I?
Please, Commissioner Patterson.
I think these are all great discussion topics. I think if I had to pick a lane, I'm actually in alignment with Commissioner Krass. I like the idea of evolving because it does say that what we have is fine for right now, but there's a chance we may have to change in the future to support this. So I think it's that balance of not too soft, not too far in another direction, but keeping the door open to adjustments.
Evolving just, it sounds so strange in a planning document. It's just such a nebulous word. That's the only thing I don't, but I agree with you guys' summation. I kind of like adjusting because, again, it lets you know that there are existing policies. It can do exactly basically what Commissioner Krass is looking for. Again, adjust, evolve, they're basically synonyms. I would probably stick with adjust myself. That would be me. But let's go ahead. Let's. Commissioner Patterson.
How many words can we come up with? I think with adjusting, to me, that is very similar to adopting in that it's saying that we're going to make a change no matter what. Whereas evolving means we'll change if we have to, or we'll change as things progress. But it doesn't mean we're going to change. Like it doesn't invoke action, if you will. So adopting and adjusting means we're going to do something whether we want to or not, or it's going to happen. That's what it means to me, is that no matter what, through these conversations, we're going to do an action on our land use policies, when in reality, that's not necessarily true, because we're going to go through this process and we might find out it's all fine, and we might find out we need to make some adjustments.
That is incredibly nuanced, and wow, like any good politician of the last 50 years, maybe I will evolve on this by simply asking if you could wordsmith what you're thinking between you and Commissioner Krass and propose something. Commissioner Milligan.
I'm going to go with the forming majority here of by evolving supportive land use policies, because I think that will work. I prefer Commissioner Zakharoff's suggestion, but for the sake of time and for the document, I think evolving supportive land use policies will work.
Commissioner Zakharoff.
Evolving existing, because I want to show that we have policies, evolving existing policies.
All right, I'll let our two evolutionists put this together for us, so if you could give us some words. Here we go, Commissioner Krass.
I think the point we're trying to make was we have something existing. We're going to make it better that supports these bigger efforts. We like the word evolving, and if you want to put evolving existing, that's fine. And now you've made me wordsmith again, which is against my nature. But I think we're close, and I think we should let Stephen decide on make sure that our discussion meets the intent of what we're not going astray on.
I think all the options kind of still meet the intent of what the policy is trying to get at. I think what we were really trying to get at with the light rail planning guide was anything new that might come up beyond just what's existing. So adjusting, evolving, when it comes to implementation, it's going to be the same thing for us. But I just want to make sure that the commission is comfortable with the language that we propose here.
Clearly, we're comfortable. No. All right, all in favor for evolving existing? Existing, I don't know if it's necessary, but staff can take that and wordsmith it to death.
Okay.
It's been a while since we've been asked to do some wordsmithing, so have to get it out of our system.
All right, we will work that in. Thank you. So for the next steps for the draft comprehensive plan is we're going to hold a public hearing on August 22nd, where we will, from that point, take the commission's recommendation to go to City Council, and then in September, we're going to meet with the Planning Development Environment Council Committee. We'll take the commission's recommendation and then also do their own review of the draft comp plan. In October, they'll finalize their review and come up with their recommendation for the Committee of the Whole. And in November, the Committee of the Whole will meet and come up with their own recommendation on the draft plan. And December 2nd will be the tentative City Council adoption date for the comprehensive plan. So in addition to the policies we've discussed tonight, are there any other policies that the commissioners would like to discuss tonight?
You guys have the entire draft comprehensive plan to speak on. I mean, I believe we'll have one more opportunity, but anything else? Mr. Milligan?
I just want to confess that I was focused on the packet and didn't explore further. So it doesn't mean that I don't have another one. We still have time to.
There's still time. We still have the public hearing on the 22nd. And as I've iterated in the previous meetings, it's all the same draft language that you've seen in previous meetings over the last year. And so if anything has been changed, we've documented that and discussed that with you. And so the only thing really new is the narratives added to each of the elements. And those things have also been discussed with multiple boards and commissions, as well as staff with each of the respective departments. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. All right, we ready to move on? Did you want to mention Sarah's? Okay. So moving on to regular business. Now we are going to be looking at the overview of the draft environmental impact statement, which was created in support of the comprehensive plan periodic update. Stephen again is up and will be presenting tonight. So Stephen, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Voice. And tonight I'm actually joined by our consultant, Mandy, who is on the screen, and she'll be actually sharing her screen going through the presentation.
Okay. Can everyone hear me all right? Good evening, commissioners.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Mandy.
Okay, thanks. I will share my screen. All right. Just make sure I got the right display setting here. Hold on.
Yep, we can see the presentation, Mandy.
Okay, great. All right, thank you. Well, good evening, commissioners. It's wonderful to be here this evening. My name is Mandy Roberts. I'm a principal planner with OTAC, and our firm is preparing the draft environmental impact statement to support the comprehensive plan. So I do have a presentation here. It's got a lot of details, and I think I'll pause as we go through for any questions and discussion. But really, the purpose of the presentation is to describe the EIS process and provide an update on where we are with it and what the next steps will be. So we'll cover what SEPA is, which I'm sure you're all well aware of that. A little bit about what an EIS is, why it's required, the topics that we're analyzing, the growth alternatives that we're looking at, and then some of the analysis results. And then, of course, next steps, as I mentioned. So the State Environmental Policy Act requires the evaluation of potential actions associated with all kinds of projects, but including governmental projects or decisions. And so the comprehensive plan is a decision, it's an action that the city plans to take, and the EIS is really a tool to help in evaluating that action, but also in planning for the future, looking at potential mitigation measures, projects, and improvements that will be needed to support growth in the future. So in the EIS, you'll see potential impacts, but also you'll see discussion around mitigation and coordination to help reduce or minimize those potential impacts so that they are not significant and they're not adverse. And another really important purpose of an EIS is to provide the opportunity for public and agency review and comment. And it is a really great process in terms of hearing from some of the utility providers, public services during the process to get their comments and start to look at making sure that the city is coordinating with them as they move forward with planning and implementation. So in this case, we'll be looking at a reasonable range of alternatives, which I'll describe in a moment. We've got mitigation measures, as I said. We'll be publishing the document for comment and hoping to hear comments from the public, local, state, and federal agencies, tribal governments, and others, service providers, as I mentioned. And then one thing to note is there are different levels of detail in EIS documents, environmental impact statement documents, and plans are considered to be a non-project type of action. So they're analyzed at a more general planning level of detail. So you will see in the EIS that we have a description of the affected environment is the term that we use, and it's really just describing existing conditions as well as future trends. Then the alternatives analysis and potential impacts that may occur under any of the alternatives, mitigation measures, and then potential significant, unavoidable, and adverse impacts if there are any. So the draft EIS is published, then there's a public comment period. It's a minimum of 30 days. Ours is going to be a little bit longer. Once we receive comments, we will be preparing responses to those, and those get published in the final environmental impact statement. And we also have an opportunity when we publish the final to make any updates to substantive content of the EIS as needed. This EIS is a little bit different than perhaps some that you may have reviewed or seen, in that the city won't be selecting a preferred alternative. The alternatives that we're analyzing, either we have two action alternatives, and either of those could be realized in the future. They're both looking at growth scenarios that could occur, and I'll explain a little bit more about those in a moment. So they're approved. There's no need to change zoning or land use designations, so there's really no need to select a preferred alternative. The purpose really of the analysis is purely to understand what the implications would be from these growth scenarios so that the city can proactively plan to serve them in the future. These are the topics that we'll be analyzing. There's demographics, housing needs, background, summary of the alternatives, consistency with plans and policies. And that includes really an overview of state, regional, county, and the city plans and policies, and how the comprehensive plan is consistent and supports those. Then we have a land use chapter, looks at land use built form and housing implementation, transportation, public services, utilities, community design, aesthetics, and natural environment. Before I move on to talk about the growth targets and alternative studied, I just want to pause for a moment to see if there's any questions on anything that I presented so far.
Any questions, commissioners? Doesn't appear. You can continue, Ms. Roberts.
Thank you. Okay, so as we think about alternatives for growth in the future, one of the things that we always check in on is what are our growth targets? And as you know, from going through the comprehensive plan process, the city has been assigned targets by King County, and these align with guidance from the state and with regional planning, and are set through a collaborative process with the city, with all the cities. And so from now basically through 2044, we're looking to increase the number of housing units by about 2,400, 2,427, and increase jobs in Issaquah by 5,565. What we're required to do is show that we have zoned capacity to accommodate this growth. And the city has more than sufficient zone capacity to accommodate this growth. This has been analyzed and confirmed. So on the very right-hand side, you can see the zoned capacity for these jobs and housing. So for the alternatives that we've studied, the first one, alternative one, is called the no action alternative. This is a requirement to be studied. In other words, we need to look at what would happen if we didn't adopt the comprehensive plan. What would be the implications of that? And basically, growth would continue. There would be existing construction projects that would continue. However, some of the challenges would be that the plan wouldn't be an updated plan that's certified by the state or that recognizes the most up-to-date regional and county goals and policies. And there's some implications related to that. If your plan is not certified, then you're not eligible to apply for certain grant funds to fund projects. So it's just not a good idea to have an out-of-date, not certified plan. It also can spur legal action within the community. So we just, kind of a no-brainer, but we still need to look at it as part of the alternatives analysis. Then we have two action alternatives, alternative 2 and alternative 3. And alternative 2 is really more of a moderate growth, looking at more growth of housing units and jobs, with the majority of them being, outside of central Issaquah and more dispersed throughout the city. And then alternative 3 takes a look at what if we had more intensive growth over the next 20 years of housing units and jobs, but with that, there would be more of a focus on growth in central Issaquah. And each alternative has differing levels of housing units and jobs, all, basically achieving, the targets, which we can meet, not a problem. But what we've done in the EIS analysis is we've looked at, okay, if we have this many housing units and this many jobs, and the correlating population to go with those, these are the types of impact that we might expect with that level of growth and change. So you can see here, housing units is the top line for alternative 1, 2, and 3. And we just chose a little bit lower look at housing units and population for alternative 1, just again to look at something that was less. than the moderate and more intensive look in alternatives 2 and alternative 3, and similar levels of change for the jobs. And jobs really correlates to commercial and office type of development, mixed use across the city. So just basically the difference is how much growth is happening outside of Central Issaquah and how much is happening inside Central Issaquah. And this table is a lot to look at, I realize that. So I won't try to explain it too much, but the idea here is that it's telling you the percentages of how many housing units and jobs are in Central Issaquah, how many are in the villages as a percent of assumed growth, and then how many are outside the villages and Central Issaquah for each of the 3 alternatives. And it's just important to recognize this and these differences because this was exactly how transportation was analyzed and modeled across the city, looking at these different geographic locations of growth and different levels of growth, and then what the trip generation was associated with those, and how that resulted in different traffic and improvement. So we do have some maps. Oh,
Can I ask a quick question? So
please.
can you define the villages? Okay, there you go. Go back to the next slide. Yeah, I think you had it with the map. Is the village?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's, is it Talus? Is that how you say that?
Talus, Lakeside. Okay.
Talus, Lakeside, and Issaquah Highlands. Yeah. Yeah. Great. I should know that one. My
And
son lives in Issaquah.
one
Yeah.
more, is Rowley just considered part of Central Issaquah?
Yes, it is, Commissioner.
Great. Any other questions about the geography? So for each of the 3 alternatives, we have this map that helps to just show the numbers of housing units and jobs for each of the geographic areas. And so the green color is the Talus, Lakeside, and Issaquah Highlands villages. The blue is Central Issaquah, and then the remaining areas are all of the orange areas. And remember, this is net new growth, so we're looking at change that's going to occur over the next 20 years above where people are already living and working today. And so we've got just the 3 maps. They're the same color geography, but just different numbers that we're looking at. So
a quick question, and you may get to this. This is Commissioner Grass. I guess the assumptions between alternative 1 and alternative 2, because there's right now there's growth that's just happening, and most of it's happening outside of Central Issaquah. So I'm curious, as you go through this, what are the assumptions difference as you go through, like what's the difference between 1 and 2, besides just there's a plan versus no plan, and what's going to drive the difference between 1 and 2? Because 3 I get, because then there's very specific things around Central Issaquah, but 1 and 2 I'm a little more cloudy on.
Yeah, I can help explain this one, Mandy. So
thank you. Yeah.
with alternative 1, we are essentially taking everything that's in our pipeline now, and that's projects that have design permits or construction permits in our system now, as well as development agreements. Those are the things that we're considering in our pipeline. With alternative 1, we're assuming full build out of everything that's in design and construction, but only partial build out of the development agreement. And that was around 50-60% of the development agreement would get built out. And so that's probably the biggest discrepancy, or the difference between alternative 1 and alternative 2 is the assumption of the development agreement built out. Now with alternative 2, Mandy, if you can move to the next one.
Yeah.
With alternative 2, we did assume a slight increase in growth in Central Issaquah just to see what it might look like beyond just the development agreements, but it really wasn't a whole lot. And you can see that in the full table of all the numbers that she had shown if you want to look back later. And then with alternative 3, we wanted to see what would, and, oh, I'll take actually a step back. With alternative 2, you'll see that even with the full build out of the DA construction and even a slight increase in central Issaquah, the majority growth is still occurring outside of central Issaquah because of a lot of those development agreements in the villages. And with alternative 3, now we have increased the assumption for central Issaquah to see what would happen if the growth, more growth did occur in central Issaquah. And that is really the bigger difference between alternative 2 and alternative 3 is the assumption that we are actually getting more growth in central Issaquah, and the growth outside of central Issaquah is pretty much steady, about the same between alternative 2 and 3. So the bigger difference is what's assumed for alternative 3 in central Issaquah. Does that help answer your question, Commissioner Kress?
I guess mine was more between 1 and 2, because
Okay.
things are just going to be continuing kind of a similar path, I would think. You know, most of the growth in the villages, there's some, it's kind of spread out everywhere, if you kind of look at it. And I would expect 1 and 2 to be much more similar than, that's what I was curious about, what you're saying, just more will get built in 2 versus 1, but there'll always be new things coming into the pipeline, which maybe is that the difference between 1 and 2? Because 1 is only looking at the snapshot of what's there now versus 2 has an assumption more will come.
Yes. And again, really the bigger difference between 1 and 2 is the assumption for the development agreement. That was really the biggest difference. And the reason why we wanted to look at a lower percentage for the build out of the development agreements is that's closer to the reality of what the development agreement. There's no magic number saying, oh, development agreements only develop 60%. It really ranges depending on development, timing, market, like all those things play into what gets fully built out. But we wanted to have an assumption, particularly with alternative 1, what would that look like with the growth, and have that analyzed as part of one of our alternatives.
But one more question. So in both 1 and 2, and maybe for all of them, because right now it's 2024 and this goes out 20 years. So the things that are in the pipeline or even in the development agreements probably only go out 6 years or something like that.
The development agreements actually go, well, some of them go 10 to 20 years.
They do? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
It depends on the development agreement and who we have it with.
Okay. Well, then I thought maybe there'd be another tranche of new things coming into the pipeline in the second half between 2034 to 2044, which those assumptions should be in all the different alternatives.
And alternative 3 is where that assumption comes in, that on top of what we have in the pipeline, something new is going to come along. And we're assuming that in Central Issaquah.
Great questions. And again, please feel free to ask. Important everyone understands this clearly. Ms. Roberts, please continue.
Okay, thank you. So now we just want to give you some highlights of the results of the analysis. And so as we look at those topics that I mentioned earlier, and what we can see, so all 3 provide opportunity to meet our growth targets, no problems there. All 3 provide capacity for the housing at needed income levels, and we've done an analysis of what's needed at the various income levels, which is fairly recent state legislation under House Bill 1220. So built that into this project. When we think about consistency with plans and policies, well, alternative 1 is not consistent. That's really the biggest issue with 1. The other 2 are and would be because they assume adoption of an updated comprehensive plan. The transportation impacts, and I'll show you some maps that show those in a minute. We are showing that there would be more pressure on the system under, with the increased population and growth as you would expect. But the impacts can be mitigated with improvements. And under alternative 3, where there's more focus of growth in Central Issaquah, and with the light rail coming to serve Central Issaquah in the future and better connectivity with transit, there's actually the potential for less vehicle miles traveled under alternative 3 and really more efficient transportation overall under alternative 3. Utility impacts, those can be mitigated. There's obviously certain system improvements that will be needed to serve growth, and those will be spelled out in the EIS. But again, under alternative 3, where we have more growth in an urban center, regional growth center, that's a more efficient way to grow. We don't have to extend lines and utility services out further. So the EIS just points that out. And basically that's the same for public services such as fire, police, other types of public services. When you're serving a more concentrated area with growing population, it becomes more efficient to do that, response times, services and whatnot. And then for this is really just a high level summary, by the way. More details are in the document, but for community design and aesthetics, all 3 growth alternatives, of course, would bring new growth and change to the city. This would all be growth that's already approved through your zoning and development agreements and whatnot. And you do have zoning provisions, as you all know, that look at how urban form and building form should look and transitions between uses. In central Issaquah, you happen to have even more design standards in place. And so it's just something that the EIS points out, that there's a lot more potential to control the aesthetics of community design under alternative 3, but really you do have control citywide because of your zone code. And environmental impacts, well, you know, of course those will be mitigated. Of course, with growth, more pressure gets put onto the environment in a lot of different ways, but we have protections in place through the Critical Areas Ordinance. We have state requirements related to surface and stormwater management that we must meet to control flows, clean our water, release it at appropriate levels, and preserve habitat. So there are a lot of stringent regulations and requirements in place that protect the environment. And you all are also doing some great work around your climate action planning and in other respects to put the environment really as a high priority at this point. So the EIS points that out as well. So at the end of the day, there really aren't any adverse significant impacts, but it's important for the city to go through this process to really show that and have an up-to-date environmental analysis that supports that. Because I'm trying to remember, when was it, 1990, Stephen, the last full EIS that was done? Yeah.
1995.
1995, okay. So basically, we don't want to have significant adverse impacts. We want to make sure we have mitigation in place to prevent that, to avoid those impacts or mitigate them to the point where they're not adversely affecting these different elements of the environment. Transportation, similar to what I just explained, but without an adopted comprehensive plan that kind of coordinates the infrastructure needs through your transportation planning and your capital facilities planning, then it will be more challenging for you to be monitoring where you are with growth. And so that's pointed out in alternative 1, whereas in alternative 2 and alternative 3, everything's being planned concurrently together. And that's really the purpose of doing comprehensive planning under the Growth Management Act. So, so that's important to point out in the document as well. This I've got a series of 3 different maps for each alternative, and you can kind of see the differences, although they are subtle. But this is the traffic volumes under alternative 1 levels of growth. And then you can see that under alternative 2, we get more increases happening in central Issaquah. And then alternative 3, just slightly more increases in volumes. And along with that, there was an analysis of intersection level of service and how that might change over time. So a lot of intersections here are shown in green under alternative 1, which is a level of service of A, B, or C. Some yellows, level of service D, and then some oranges, level of service E. Don't have any Fs under alternative 1. And actually, under alternative 2, because of improvements planned and proposed mitigations, we're seeing, relatively minor changes in level of service. So that can be maintained the same. In alternative 3, we're seeing a few more intersections where we're getting to D and E, but never to F. And that is because the city is very proactive in planning the transportation improvements needed for long-term growth and making sure that you're managing transportation. And you're working really diligently on your active transportation plan. And I heard you guys talk a lot about that tonight. So thinking about how people can get around your community other than driving, what options they have, the Peaks to Creeks plan and trail network, all of those things contribute to less pressure on intersections. So those are all great things. Public services, all anticipated to keep pace with growth, but that takes a lot of coordination. And talking to the school district, for example, talking about where the city's planning to grow, how that relates to existing school district facilities, and keeping that dialogue going over time as the city monitors growth and what's going on with the development agreements. So that ongoing dialogue is something that's important and pointed out in the EIS as a mitigation measure that will be needed on an ongoing basis. And utilities, same, lots of coordination needed with utility service providers, including the utilities that the city provides, as well as those that Smash Plateau water provide, and then power and communications and other providers. Kind of already talked about community design and aesthetics and the environment. It's just, again, kind of a high level summary. So I'll just go to next steps. We are planning to publish this EIS next week. We are a little bit behind, and I apologize to everyone for that. We were hoping to get it out this week, but we'll still be on track with the schedule and adoption. If we will plan to get this out next week, and we'll stay on track with that. We are going to hold a separate public hearing on the draft EIS on September 12th, and then we'll have a 37-day comment period. We just wanted to give it a little bit more time through September 20th to just give folks more time to comment if they need that. And then later in September, we will publish the EIS. So if folks want to comment on the EIS when it's published, and it will be on the city's website, published there, they can send comments to Long Range Planning, which there's a specific email set up for that, which is 2044 DEIS@issaquah.gov. And I think I'll just pause right there to see if Stephen has anything he wants to add.
No, I just want to thank Mandy and her team for the help in going through this analysis. It's as you can see, it's a lot of work, and it's going to be it has a lot of support for what the draft comprehensive plan is posing, and so I just want to make sure we had this conversation with the commission so they understood the level of effort that kind of goes into these kind of things, particularly when you do a full environmental impact statement. Because it's important. It's important for us to look at those different growth alternatives and be prepared for different scenarios, and make sure that we have a better understanding of how best to be prepared in different scenarios where we either get more growth or get less growth, and how that impacts our other planning efforts. So that's one of the bigger purposes of having this conversation, but also helping the commission understand like the full effort kind of going into the periodic update.
Okay, we'll probably open it up for some questions. So, Ms. Roberts, if you wouldn't mind sticking around for a moment. Any questions? Commissioner Milligan.
I am really not getting this, and I'm sorry, I know I've gone through this before, but the alternatives, these are possible outcomes, or these are something that if we prefer one, will change the way that the comprehensive plan is updated? I'm kind of lost at that point. Beginning, in other words.
And Stephen, let me know if you want to take a first run at answering, but I'm happy to respond if you'd like.
So I can respond to that, Commissioner Milligan. So with the growth alternatives, it's the possible growth that we could expect and how best to prepare. And with the preferred alternatives, that's particularly useful when we are expecting major changes to land use or zoning, and then we need to have a preferred alternative to help us determine how to make those changes. But in our case, where we had the Central Issaquah plan and an EIS developed for Central Issaquah, and we had the analysis for the development of the Regional Growth Center designation, all of our growth alternatives are still consistent with all of that analysis that was done with that planning effort. So that was the reason why we don't have a preferred alternative with this EIS, is because it is consistent with all of those alternatives that were analyzed with the Central Issaquah EIS.
Okay, so then I think I understand the words you're saying. The other thing that I don't quite understand is alternative one means that we do not adopt the changes in the update that we've been talking about. And there's something in the changes in the updated comprehensive plan that is either going to create alternative 2 or alternative 3. But we will not have alternative 1 if we adopt the updated comprehensive plan?
I'll start with alternative 1. So alternative 1 is really the assumption is that we take no action to adopt the updated comprehensive plan that has new growth projections, new growth numbers, new assumptions, new policies to go aligned with those assumptions, as well as new policies to build consistency between the different topic areas that are, the different elements in the comprehensive plan. And that actually puts us out of compliance with state requirements, county requirements, even regional requirements with those same policies that are proposed in the draft comprehensive plan. So really the biggest difference between that and alternative 2 and 3 is that adopted comprehensive plan with new policies that align with how we want our growth to look, or how we want to look with either alternative 2 or 3 growth alternatives. Does that help answer your question?
I think your question, once it's adopted, number 1 goes away. It disappears. It disappears. Is that a fair assessment? Because it's adopted.
It's just part of the analysis for the whole EIS. It's not that if we adopt the comprehensive plan, yeah, we obviously took an action, but it was just an analysis for the EIS for us to see what would occur or what would be the potential impacts by not adopting the comprehensive plan.
So if we adopt the updates, the comprehensive plan, there are changed growth numbers in there, which I can't remember because it was so long ago, that either put more growth in the villages or more growth in Central Issaquah, but we have increased our growth targets for 2044 in the adopted comprehensive plan.
Correct.
And why do I not remember doing that? And man, okay, I'm gonna hold on my.
Any other questions? Yeah, I mean, I'll try and take a stab at it. I mean, ultimately, it's just an analysis. I mean, again, it doesn't mean anyone's going to build anything. But if we don't do anything, if we don't take the the legislature's different laws, which we've been working on for a year. If we didn't do any of that, we just left with the old comprehensive plan from however many years ago, most likely because of our zoning and all of these different things, we would be limiting ourselves. It would be more sporadic. I think number two is, to Stephen's point, you take the comprehensive plan, you pass it. These are the things we've, for lack of a better word, up zones, created the conditions for. It's more centralized, it's focused. Number three is really what the city of Issaquah has been doing for the last few years, which is focusing our growth in central Issaquah. Think of the Pioneer Program. So all the things we're trying to do to funnel so much of our build out in central Issaquah, ideally, that is a situation with all that focus, the potential would be there for more efficiency, more jobs, more things like that. Am I reading you right?
Correct.
But ultimately, it's an analysis. I mean, it's kind of confirmation of what the city's doing, which is why we don't have a preferred alternative, because we're already working towards basically number three.
Now, if we, just to add on a little bit more to help with the explanation, if we were proposing major land use changes and major zoning changes, then we would need the preferred alternative, because we wouldn't know which change to take without that preferred alternative. But because we're not proposing any major land use or zoning changes, we didn't need to have a preferred alternative. So it's primarily, to Chair Voice's point, more of an analysis to support a lot of the policies that are in the comprehensive plan. Mandy, is there anything for you to add?
No, I think that covers it.
Okay.
I think it's an analysis to really at the tool to help the city plan for the future.
Sure. Is there any questions from any of our other commissioners? I want to make sure everybody gets fair amount of time up here, equitable time up here. Commissioner Patterson.
Commissioner Patterson, mine's more of a, I guess, process question. Looking at the dates that were provided, is my assumption correct that we'll be able to look at the draft between now and September 12th, and then we will have the public hearing as part of our commission? Is that
Correct.
Okay. Will there be any other, will this be included in our next commission meeting as any kind of action item?
Not on August 22nd.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I think the only other question I have, Chair Voice, is 30 years? 30 years since we've performed this task?
The full EIS, yes. Every comprehensive plan update we've had since then, we've had supplemental checklists.
Okay.
So we haven't performed the full EIS since 1995.
How often is the city believe that a full EIS is necessary?
The Department of Ecology looks for cities to update their environmental impact statements when they see a major change in condition. And so we felt with this periodic update that we have reached that point where there's a lot of change in major conditions for the city that warranted having a full EIS updated.
So it's no real time frame. It's not going to be updated every time a comprehensive.
No, it's not like every 5 years or something
Right.
like that. It really is dependent on the city and how conditions change.
Okay. Commissioner Milligan?
Thank you. Commissioner Milligan again. Okay, going back to your charts and such, and I'll use the phrasing in the packet. Alternative 2 is moderate growth. Alternative 3 is intense growth. And I wanted to ask about public services and utilities. And there was just the overview summary was that there was no adverse impacts that couldn't be mitigated. But I was wondering about, is the cost to the city considered, increased cost to the city considered as an adverse impact? Or how does financial burden on the city get evaluated there?
There is not a financial analysis as part of the EIS. It's a programmatic level of analysis that looks at, the relative impacts based on population. But what's important to remember is that there is property and population tax generation that helps to support the cost of growth And within the development agreements, development projects, they also pay impact fees for different types of services, and that helps to cover those costs over time. So those are the types of things that are described and called out in the EIS. Yeah.
Commissioner Krass?
I do have one other question. So is there, as part of this exercise, an alternative 4? An alternative 4 is there is even much larger growth in Issaquah over the next 20 years than we've planned. And is there a tipping point where, because the chart you had was like everything, we could mitigate anything right here. That was good. Somewhere could be more efficient, but everything looks like it could be handled. Is there, as part of the analysis, where the tipping point is in 20 years, where especially on a population standpoint, where things start breaking down, whether it's in public service, utilities, environment, et cetera? Or is that just out of scope for what this was?
For this EIS, it's out of scope, and it's primarily because if we get to the point where we're starting to see significantly higher growth coming into the city or even the region than any of us expected, then we would actually just do this analysis again. And so with this analysis, we really wanted to focus on what do we know now, what are the potentials, what's within what we've analyzed before with development of the Central Issaquah Plan, what was the EIS for the Central Issaquah Plan, what went into the analysis for the designation of the Regional Growth Center, what is the region looking at when it comes to growth, and how that might impact how the city grows or our neighboring cities grow. So we really wanted to stay in that scope for this analysis. We also are limited on budget, so the number of alternatives that we analyze is also outside of within the budget that we had for this project as well.
Great questions, though.
Would you say, Stephen, that alternative 3, though, is really, I mean, we feel like it's probably the most intensive growth that you would experience in the next 20 years. It's more intensive than you're likely to experience, but, it's more on the high side.
Yes, I would agree with that, particularly because a lot of the growth that we're seeing from the development agreements and what I described being in the pipeline for development is showing more growth outside of Central Issaquah right now. So that leaves a huge potential for growth in Central Issaquah, which is what we've been intending to do with Central Issaquah for a long time. But it is on the higher side in terms of the level of growth that this city could see.
Anything further from the commission? That was a great discussion. And yeah, Commissioner Milligan, yeah, the financial impact, that would be important too, but I know it wasn't part of this discussion. But yeah, you think of utilities, schools, everything like that. And again, I hear Ms. Roberts with the generated tax revenues and things like that, but not, what was it? Out of our scope tonight. There's the word. Okay. Is there anything further for Ms. Roberts? Well, thank you, Ms. Roberts, for a fantastic presentation and a great discussion. Yeah, great job, and thank you, and looking forward to hearing more about the DEIS as it moves through the pipeline.
Thank you
No
so
pun
much.
intended.
I think the last thing I'll say with the DEIS is we'll let the commission know once that is actually published next week.
Okay,
Thank
Steve.
you. Good night.
Sure, yeah.
Stephen, in the draft comprehensive plan update, where are the increased growth numbers located?
You'll see it in the land use element,
use.
land use and sustainability element.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other further questions for Stephen on this topic? Stephen, thank you for the discussion. I know there's really not a whole lot you collected other than a little bit of feedback.
No, I think it's helpful to know kind of the areas that either might be confusing or the draft EIS. It's not a intuitive document, and it's not small by any means. So we wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity to help explain what's in this, why are we doing it, how are we analyzing this, and how this impacts the draft comprehensive plan that we've been discussing for the last year. Just because they do interact with each other and they have a certain relationship that is important to how we are planning for our growth.
Okay. Having said that, I believe now we are going to move on to reports.
For council update, August every year is a fairly quiet month for council. They don't meet very often or at all. So I'll actually refer to the August 5th meeting. The council actually received a informational presentation on the I-90 crossing project. If you're interested in learning more about that project, that's going to have a significant impact on connectivity in Central Issaquah across I-90 as it relates to the city's growth and being able to meet vision for Central Issaquah. On July 22nd, there's also more information about the TOD project, the Transit-Oriented Development Project that's been in the works for several years. And so you can see that presentation for the July 22nd council meeting if you want to learn more about that. But for the most part, there's not too much to update this month for council.
Quiet August, like that. Okay. Are there any other further announcements, Stephen, that you have for us?
Just one quick announcement. Vice Chair, as many of you probably saw, Vice Chair Bader did send an email saying hello from France, but also just to emphasize her support for a lot of the language in the conference plan around racial equity. Her recommendation is not to soften the language in the conference plan as it relates to equity and is supportive of what is introduced. And so just wanted to bring that up in the commission's meeting tonight. And if you haven't read it, read it, and we will continue our conversations of the conference plan on the 22nd. Actually, one more announcement. Due to the 2 recent resignations of commissioners, we are going to work with the mayor's office to actually kick off a special recruitment, so we'll keep you updated as we work through that process over the coming months.
Okay. Well, thank you, Stephen. All right. Is there any other announcements, anything on the calendar, Stephen, we should be aware of?
No changes on the calendar other than what's presented in your packet tonight.
Okay. Commissioners, anything you'd like to add? Commissioner Patterson.
I just want to go on record as saying my favorite part of this meeting was when the traffic map came up and you leaned very close to the screen. I know how passionate you are about traffic.
Yes. Yes, I am. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, we'll leave it there. But thank you, Commissioner Patterson. Anything else for the good of the order? All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for spending this beautiful August evening with us indoors. And we will adjourn tonight's meeting at 7:52. Thank you.